Good evening, welcome to Fantasy Formula Podcast. I'm your host, Paul, and today we are going to be going over the driver bio for Esteban Ocon. He is number 31, driving for Team Alpine. We're going to go over his 2023 results and his performance and how that translates to Fantasy Formula 1 points and see what we can derive and hopefully predict for the 2024 season. So for 2023, his initial value was $9.4 million. And in case anybody's uninitiated, you start with a $100 million budget. So he took about a tenth of the budget starting out, and he finished the year at $13.5 million. So he went up about 4.1, and so he would end up being close to 14% of your overall budget for the year. So we're gonna go race by race and see how he did. Kicking off with Bahrain, round 1. He qualified 9th, finished 20th, which because he got a DNF on lap 41, so he didn't finish the race. And if you are new to the podcast, at least in 2023, the rules for 2024 haven't come out yet, but if you don't finish the race, you get negative 20 points. So he finished that race with negative 17. For round number 2, qualified 7th, finished 8th. Not bad. Finished it off with 7 fantasy points. So we're going on to round 3, qualified 11th, finished 20th again, got a DNF on lap 56, along with Logan Sargent, Nick DeVries, and Pierre Gasly. So my guess is there was a collision of some kind. Without going back race by, going off lap by lap, I'm not going to go back and dig all that up. But it didn't work out too well for him on that one. Round number 4, he qualified 12th, finished 15th, walked out with 7 points. Not where you want to be, but again, he only took a few laps, finished in the green, fine. Whether or not it's worth the 10 million he was being charged, we'll discuss that later on. Qualified 8th in the United States for round 5 in Miami. Qualified 8th, finished 9th, not bad. Walked away with 8 points. Round 6 didn't occur. Round 7 in Monaco. Qualified 4th, finished 3rd, so he finished on the podium, which is great. And finished that race with 32 fantasy points, which is wonderful. That's right where you want to be, especially if you're, spending 10% of your overall budget on a driver. You want them doing that. You want them, finishing better than they qualify, and definitely finishing in the top 10 and finishing on the podium. Perfect. Going on to round 8 in Spain, qualified 7, finished 8. Okay, so the trend here we're looking at is he's most of the time qualifying in the points. The bad part is he's finishing less. Now, if you qualify, whatever position you start the race in, when you finish the race, if you're higher position, you get 1 point for every position you're up. Lesser position, negative 1 point for every position you're down. But there's you get points for qualifying in the top 10, and you get more points for finishing in the top 10. So in the end, he's doing fine. He got 9 points there, which as soon as you pay $9 million for him and he gets 9 points in a race, it's 1 point per million. Not wonderful, but like Max Verstappen in 2023 had 1.7, a fantastic point per million, be 0.5. If you can on average have every one of your drivers have a point per $1 million or worth, then as soon as you go getting the bonuses and things like that, then it works out very well. So as on round 8, he's doing just fine. Round 9 in Canada, again, qualified 6th, finished 8th, still in the top 10, not bad. Walks out with 11 points, good. Round 10 in Australia, qualified 12th, finished 14th. Not what we want. He's outside of the points. He walks away with 9, though, probably because he did lots of passing. He was 1 lap down, fine. But that's fine. Round 11 in Great Britain, qualified 13th and got a DNF on lap 9. Again, not sure what went on, but he walked away with a negative 18 points for that round 11. Round 12 in Hungary, again, qualified 12th. Got a DNF on lap 2. Pierre Gasly went out on lap 1. So my guess is they had some contact there. Don't know that for sure. But finished the weekend with negative 19 points. Not what you're looking for. Qualified 15, finished 8th. Wonderful. Perfect. On round 13 in Belgium, 23 points. Perfect. Round number 14 in the Netherlands, qualified 17th, finished 10th. Wonderful. 26 points. Climbing it up. Wonderful. Round 15 in Italy, qualified 18th, finished 20th. He got a DNF on lap 39. Looked like a solo DNF. I'm not sure what the driver was of that. Round 16 in Singapore, and if you remember in Singapore, that's the one race that Max Verstappen did not win. Carlos Sainz won it, or not. Red Bull didn't win, I should say. But yeah, Esteban Ocon qualified 8th again, finished 20th. Now, I say finished 20th. As soon as you, in fantasy F1, as soon as you crash out, whether it be on lap 1 or, 80% through, you get negative 20 points in the fantasy game, right? And if you finish like 90% of it, then they'll actually give you a position, and things like that. Fine. So with all the drivers, like for example in Singapore, you had Lance Stroll just didn't race because I think he crashed in qualifying. We'll talk about him later, or in practice. But you had Yuki Tsunoda, Valtteri Bottas, George Russell, and Esteban Ocon all DNF. So I give them all negative 20 points and have them all, like in F1 they should, according to the rules they should, but then I also have them all be position 20. So I say he finished 20th. Nah, in actual F1 standings he might probably finished 16th, but for the fantasy reasons he just gets negative 20 points, so we have him all be last. So yeah, so he finished probably 16th, but I'm calling finishing 20 gets negative 20 points. Not at all what you're looking for. Round 17 in Japan, qualified 14th, finished 9th. Perfect, gets 10 points. 18 in Qatar, qualified 8th, finished 7th. Wonderful. Only gets 2 points. I'm not sure quite how all that shook out. He, was that a... yeah, I don't know. I'm not quite sure why he only got 2 points. He probably got passed a lot and things like that. For round 19 in Texas, qualified 15th again, finished 20th. He crashed out on lap 6. Got a DNF. On round 20 in Mexico, qualified 4th, finished 7th. Still, hey, he finished. He's in the top 10, and he gets 10 fantasy points. Now, this is interesting, though. So he qualified 4th, finished 10th. So he finished in the top 10 here, got 10 points. The previous race, he... actually, not the previous race because he crashed out. But the previous race, he qualified 8th, finished 7th, again in the top 10, but he only got 2. And that's because in Fantasy F1... if you are in the pits and you get passed, it's fine. But every pass you make on merit, or every time you get passed on merit, you get positive or negative 1 point. So it is possible for people to be passed multiple times throughout the race and gain or lose a whole bunch of points. Round 21 in Brazil, qualified 17th, finished 13th. Perfect. Got 17 points. Las Vegas, qualified 17th, finished 4th. Las Vegas in 2023 was the first year they were having the race in Vegas, and there was a lot of controversy going into. There were some issues with the track. No one had ever raced there before. Everything was equal, and this is pretty good because since everybody was a rookie on that track, he finished 4th, which is wonderful. He got 40 points, which is huge. That is an amazing thing, especially for somebody who's worth, who's only at this point is probably closer to 13 million. Getting 40 points is wonderful. Then the last race of the season, Abu Dhabi, qualified 15th, finished 11th, and only got 2 points. I'm not sure why that worked out that way. So the trend we're seeing is he's usually, if he's in the top 10, he usually qualifies worse than he did. But if he qualifies in the middle of the bottom 10, then he'll usually go up or he'll crash out. So let's go ahead and look at his end of the year total stats. So he completed 22 rounds. He raced 22 rounds. He overtook 121 times, which is very, very good. Average overtakes per race, 5.5. Fine. He made 1 podium, which is awesome. So he makes podiums about 5% of the year, which, again, if it's just, $10 million, $13 million, that's great. Here's the stat that gets it, though. He had 6 DNFs. 27% of the races he raced, he didn't finish, which is now, and I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to keep mentioning it. DNFs, or do not finish in fantasy F1 is different than in the actual Formula One racing, right? In actual F1, if you're a driver who, since you only get points for the top 10, if your team knows you're not going to make it into the points and you have anything wrong with your car, they might just choose to retire you to save the car, save the wear and tear, save the thing, whatever. And it doesn't hurt. Like, it might not be impressive, but they don't get penalized whether you finish 20th or you finish 11th, as far as the championship points are concerned, it's all the same. Unless I'm wrong. I don't think I am, but it's all the same. But and then there's morale, and there's like different incentives and things like that. But some teams, like Haas, for example, they're not trying. Yes, they're just trying to get into the points, right? Like Williams, they're just trying to get with Logan Sargent. They're trying to get into the points with Esteban Ocon here. They're trying to they're trying to move their way up the points and stay in the points. So as soon as you're going to be finishing 15, 16, 17, and there's anything wrong with the car, they'll probably just retire you, which is smart for them, but not really smart for us, because as soon as you start getting retired, then you start getting those negative 20 points. So he downtook, if he retired 6 times and you get negative 20 points, that means he's missing out on 2 times 6 is 120 fantasy points that he would have gotten if he hadn't retired. So let's look at the rest of his stats real quick. Percent in the bottom 10 and didn't DNF 20%. Okay, cool. But that's an interesting stat too. What it means is he usually, if he finishes in the bottom 10%, 80% of the time, and did not DNF, 80% of the time, if he finishes in the bottom 10, he crashed out, which stinks. So, driver of the day once, okay, fine. End of year cost 13.5. We talked about it. End of the year fantasy points is 120. 40 of those were gotten on one race. Not bueno there. And if you notice the number he crashed out 6 times. That's 120. He would have doubled his fantasy points if he hadn't gotten any DNFs. If he had doubled his fantasy points, then his points per million, what he finished the year, is 0.4, right? If he hadn't crashed out, he would have been at 0.8, because he would have gotten double the points. And if he had done that, then he would have been in the same sort of tier as he'd been right there on par with George Russell. He would have gotten more fantasy points than he would have gotten a better point per million than Lance Stroll. He would have been just a few points behind Carlos Sainz. So he was fully capable when he didn't crash. If all those races he hadn't crashed, he had just raced on average the way he had the rest of the time. Yeah, man, he would have been right up there with Lance Stroll, Carlos Sainz. It would have been great, but because he crashed, as far as fantasy F1 is concerned, because he crashed, that's what crippled him. So, hopefully, crippled the season, I should say. Hopefully, in 2024, that's not the way it is. Some people, I know I have, like within my circle, some people just really go for Ocon, and not last year, but the year before, I think it was. I had him for a while, and as soon as he can just avoid the DNFs, and he'll be a solid player. I think him starting out at $9 million, if without the DNFs, for $9 million, solid value, absolutely. But again, based on this, we can assume he's going to crash out and cost you half of his points throughout the course of the season. Well, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Cheers.